If Kamala says the economy is recovered, she's either lying or delusional. Either way, she's leaving us behind. Reject Kamala. Paid for by Duty to America PAC. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. DutyToAmericaPAC.com.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Good afternoon, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. We are on every Saturday afternoon, 1 to 3 p.m. Thank you so much to my good friend, John Catsimatidis, who is the owner of this station and has he turned this thing around. It is a powerhouse radio show and station. And I'm so privileged to be able to follow my good friend, Larry Kudlow. You all probably listen to the Kudlow Show as well. So we have a great show this afternoon, folks. We've got my good friend and co-author Arthur Laffer coming on. We have Ralph Reed, who is one of the top political strategists in the country, and many others. So I hope you will stick with us through the next 2 hours. This is about teaching you about the economy, about finance, about how to make more money. We talk a lot about what's going on with the elections, because this is going to be one of the most consequential elections in American history, in my opinion. I don't think you can get two candidates who have a more diametrically opposite view about how to deal with our economy and the problems abroad, crime, immigration. I mean, really, as I've said many times on this show, Trump is on Venus and the Democrats, including Kamala Harris, are on Mars. So this is your choice, folks. You decide. That's what makes America a great country, is that we let the voters decide. We by the way, we are not, just so people know, we are not a democracy. I'm tired of liberals saying we are a democracy. Obviously, we democratically elect our president, but we are a representative form of government. This is not mob rule. This is not 50% plus one, get the stampede over the rights of the minority. One of the things that makes our country great is that we do protect the rights of the minority. And I wish they would stop saying that we are a democracy. We're a representative form of government. It was set up by our amazing founding fathers, the smartest people. Probably the smartest assemblage of people in the history of the world were the people at the Constitutional Convention, who really set up an amazing form of government that has become the envy of the world. So we're going to talk a lot about the economy this afternoon and about why we need to cut taxes. Now, I have a big announcement for you folks, and this is something really important, and it's going to sound self-serving. It's going to sound like an advertisement, but it isn't. And incidentally, unlike most shows on the radio right now, if you were to flick your dial, and please do not do that because I want you to stay on with me. But if you were to do that, you'd be making a mistake, because you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a lot of infomercials. You're going to get hour, 2 hour long, everything from selling, jewelry to selling financial products to this and that. It's boring. It's boring. I mean, I can't even stand that stuff. We are on everyone. We have great new programming every afternoon, just like Larry Kudlow is live. And by the way, 5 hours of great economics. You can't find that anywhere else. You can't. I challenge somebody to tell me where you're going to get a better analysis of what's going on than on our two shows. Now, my announcement is this. A new book just arrived in the bookstores, just arrived on Amazon. It is called, are you ready for this? Drum beat, please. It is called The Trump Economic Miracle. The Trump Economic Miracle, and it chronicles the incredible things that Donald Trump did for our economy. We've got all the charts in there. We've got all the data. It's the official government data. And we look at, what matters and what doesn't to American households in terms of paying their bills and the kitchen table issues. And we contrast that with what has happened under Biden and Kamala Harris. And what we find, and for those of you who are regular listeners to this show, this isn't going to surprise you. We find out of the 20 major economic measurements of how a country is doing, small business conditions, the stock market, what's happened with inflation, what's happened to grocery prices, what's happened to gas prices, what's happened to mortgage rates, what's happened to home ownership, all of these things, what's happened to labor productivity, jobs. It turns out 18 of those 20 measurements Trump is superior to Biden. And that is, in most cases, even when you include the down year of 2020, which was, of course, of COVID, when we very tragically shut down our economy. Hopefully, we will never do that again. But this book has it all, and it's something you could read in literally 3 nights. It's not a heavy read, but it has a lot of the data and statistics and pictures and look, if you're already decided who you're going to vote for, show your friends who may be undecided. My opinion on is this. Look, I know a lot of people care about abortion. A lot of people care about Trump's character. They don't like some of the things that he says. Some people love the idea of electing the first black woman to president. Look, I get that. I get it. But if you're most concerned, as I am, and I think most of you would agree with this, if you agree that the most important thing right now is the national security of our country, the border, and the economy, those are the things that matter most right now that are of urgent attention. I would add to that the incredible decline of our schools. Trump is the one. There's no doubt about it. If it's the issues of the economy that matter to you. And so that book is going to be available virtually immediately. You can go on Amazon right now and get it. I hope you will. I'm proud of it. My co-author is Arthur Laffer. He's going to come on the show in a few minutes and talk about the book. But we showed it to Trump. Trump wrote the foreword to the book. In fact, a funny quick story, when we told Donald Trump in a meeting about 4 or 5 months ago, we were writing this book, he's, oh, great. And he loved the charts, by the way. He uses a lot of those charts all the time in his speeches. He said, well, what are you guys going to call the book? And I told the president, I said, well, Mr. President, we want to call this book the Trumponomics 2.0. No, I don't like that title. He said, call it the Trump economic miracle. So, when the president gives you that kind of advice, you follow his advice. But I think you'll enjoy it. It's not a heavy read. It's not, there's no tests at the end of it. But I think you'll be well educated. And it's a nice tutorial, by the way. Give it to your kids. Give it to teenagers and college kids so they can learn about how the economy works. If you cut taxes, if you cut regulations, if you have better trade deals, if you get rid of government waste, if you put America first, guess what? You're going to get a booming economy. That's what we had under Trump. So this is critical because right now, every single poll has this race laser tight. I mean, it is so close right now in all of these states and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Arizona. I think Trump could, do well in these northeastern states. I know most of my audience, most of you listening are either in Connecticut or New Jersey and, of course, New York and the city. Those maybe Trump's not going to win those races, but he could win. He could pull a lot of other candidates over the goal line. So that is a big deal. One of the things I wanted to mention to you, and we're going to talk about this later in the show as well, is people have to pay attention to what Kamala Harris wants to do on the tax burden. And I have a piece coming out with a co-author that'll be probably in the Wall Street Journal next week. And we talk about what it means to raise the capital gains tax and the corporate tax and the dividend tax. And what we find in this piece is that if you did what Kamala is talking about, and many people may say, oh, who cares if we raise taxes on businesses? Well, it has an impact because we all, as Americans, own these businesses, right? Anyone who has a 401k plan. And what we found was that, let's start with the corporate tax. She wants to raise that tax to about 33%. I can't be precise because she keeps changing her mind every few days about how high it is, but she's endorsed a tax of about 33% on corporate. Then you add the 5 or 6% that the states take. And if you're in, New York or Connecticut or New Jersey, it's more than that. But let's say now you're at about 36, 37%. That means that the government is taking the first 36 to 37% of the profits of every corporation in America, if you understand, because if they're taxing 37% of it, they get the first slice of it. Now, then you have to add to that the capital gains tax, because when you invest in something, you invest so it appreciates in value, and then you have to pay a tax on that appreciation, which is the value of share of stock is just the discounted present value of the future earnings of the company. So that is also, she wants to raise that tax to Again, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere around 31% plus the state and local. That's 40. So you're taking 40% off the top, so that leaves you 60%. Then you're taking 40% of that. That's what I'm telling you, is that this means that the federal government and state governments are going to take more than 50% of the profits of a company. What that means is it's diluting the value of your shares. It's almost like the government is a 50% shareholder of every company in America. Think about that, a 50% shareholder. Now, this is not complicated. If the government is taking 50%, what is going to happen to the value of your stock? Think about that for a minute. What's going to happen? Is the value of your stock going to go up or down? I'm here to tell you it has to go down. This is just math, folks. And so you're going to see a big, big decline in the value of stocks if Kamala Harris is elected and if she puts in this dumb an economically masochistic tax plan. So let's hope that doesn't happen. We'll be right back, folks. My first guest this afternoon is the great Arthur Laffer. He'll be with us in 1 minute. This is WABC Talk Radio.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. Great to be with you, as always, between 1 and 3 p.m. every Saturday afternoon. And now I am really privileged to introduce my next guest. I always say, by the way, that I am not the world's greatest radio talk show host, but I get some of the world's greatest guests on the air. And I think that's one reason we have so many loyal listeners like you. So Arthur Laffer, one of the great economists, not just living, but of all time. I checked this out on ChatGPT not too long ago, and I asked who are the most famous economists and influential economists of all time. And, Adam Smith came on, and John Maynard Keynes come on the list, and John Kenneth Galbraith. But Arthur Laffer was number 16, I believe, on that list of all-time great economists. So, Arthur, what a privilege it is to have you on the air.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I love it, love it, love it. Keep going. I like the way you do that.
Okay. Well, that was the good news. Do you want to hear the bad news?
Yes,
Arthur?
I do.
You know who is number 14 on the list?
Paul Krugman.
Paul Krugman. I don't know how that happened because he's been wrong on everything, but nonetheless, you are with an incredibly incredible number of fantastic economists who we all learned economics from. And so I wanted to start this conversation by telling our audience that a new book is out. It has just been released a few days ago. And the name of that book is The Trump Economic Miracle. And a co-author of that book is Arthur Laffer. And I wonder how many of you can guess who the other co-author is. Yes, it is me, Steve Moore. And Arthur, it was really an honor to co-author. I think this is about our third or fourth book, but The Trump Economic Miracle is out.
And that doesn't count Rich States, Poor States.
Oh, we've probably written about
14 or so of those.
Okay. I don't know if we count that as 14 books, but
we've done that. At least as one.
Okay. Right. And then we did Trumponomics, and we did The End of Prosperity and Return to Prosperity. Did. And I can't even remember all the other ones we've done. So, but by the way, we called it On the End of Prosperity, right? We come out with that book and all of a sudden the economy collapses. Yeah. So let's talk about Trump, the Trump Economic Miracle. One thing that you've said in some of your public declarations, as we've done a bunch of interviews on this book, is you've said something that I think actually surprised me a little bit. You said that Donald Trump has had the best first term of any president in modern times. And I was a little surprised about that because you worked for Ronald Reagan, who had a pretty good first term himself. So explain what you mean.
Yeah, well, I do not mean to disparage Ronald Reagan at all. He was great. Second term was magnificent with the 86 Tax Act. But in the first term, Donald Trump did the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And he avoided a huge problem of phasing that tax in, which would have caused a recession. He did not make that mistake. Phenomenal thing. Dropped the highest tax rate from, 44% down to 21%. And he did an incredible job on personal income, dropped it from 39.6 to 37, dropped the estate tax. I mean, it was fantastic. The performance of the economy was unbelievable when the pandemic hit. He did the Operation Warp Speed and developed the vaccine in less than 10 months.
That's
amazing.
Which
is just unheard of.
Probably that, by the way, probably you could make a case that worldwide, that probably saved millions of lives.
Yeah, and especially in the elderly. I mean,
yes.
I got that vaccine in December of that year of 2020. And, I'm 84 right now. I was pretty old back then, even then. And
right.
So, for the elderly and those of us healthcare workers and all that, it was a godsend. Now, there are some people very young that should not have gotten that vaccine.
Right.
And, that wasn't tested, wasn't tried. And kids in kindergarten and nursery school and all that should not have gotten it because they were not at risk. But that wasn't Trump's fault. Trump developed the vaccine, period. Right to try, he put that through.
Yes.
Right to try means if you've got a terminal disease, you're right to try any medicine you want. Why the heck not?
Hold on, time out just for a second. Because you told an amazing story at an event we were at this week about how some of this new cancer drug basically saved the life of your daughter.
Yes, it did. The funds spent, they put it about $1 trillion for research into the diseases there, which went into mRNA and mRNA and all sorts of other genetic types of things in the immune system. And one of the diseases that was literally incurable was metastatic melanoma. My daughter had metastatic melanoma,
which is very deadly, right? That's a very deadly.
Totally deadly.
Right.
Yep. And that was 2 years ago that she got Opdualag, which they were saying she was going to die within 12, 14 months, 12, 14 weeks, something like that. And instead, with the Opdualag, because of the warp speed, she's still alive and doing really well, and the tumors are shrinking.
My gosh.
It really got the immune system going, and I can't tell you how much I owe Donald Trump because of that. And then Steve, the Supreme Court. Now, we think of the Supreme Court as all sorts of other decisions, but the Supreme Court on economics made decisions that regulatory bodies are not allowed to pass legislation. And so he rolled them back quite substantially, which is just unbelievable.
That's called the Chevron decision. And it was really one of the most important decisions the Supreme Court has ever made. And it basically said, regulatory agencies don't have the authority to make law. That's required by Congress.
Exactly. And then you look at the energy control that Trump did, which made us energy independent. Now look at us. But, if you add up all these things together, I mean, there was no inflation. There was about 1.5% inflation throughout his term, flat.
Yep.
And then when Biden came in, it went way up to 9% and down again now a little bit, but it's still prices are rising way too rapidly. He did all of these things. He got three major free trade deals with USMCA. We got the one with Japan and the one with South Korea. Really free trade deals. And if you look at what Trump did rather than what Trump says, he did a great job of enhancing free trade. So I look at Trump as being the most magnificent first term of any American president, not just in modern times, Steve, ever.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. So, look, I think Reagan had a great term. By the way, explain to people, because you've explained this to me many times when we talk about it in the book. You said, excuse me, one of the mistakes that Reagan made was that when he did his tax cut in 1981, which was pretty historic, 30% across the board, but you said they delayed the tax cut, and you think that contributed to the recession and the delayed
that literally
recovery.
Caused. I mean, the tax cut was phased into where it didn't begin until 1983, January 1st, 1983.
Even though it passed in 81.
Yes, but they wanted to phase it in, so we had a 1.25% cut in 81. We had a 10% cut in 82, and we had a 20% cut on January 1st, 1983. And if you know tax rates are going to be lower next year than they are this year, what do? You defer all the income you can out of this year into next year, which is what people did. And we had this huge boom starting on January 1st and a deep recession in 81, 82. That's
so
tell people that the tax delay.
Tell people that statistic that it's in the book. Again, folks, this is the Trump economic miracle. Yeah.
From January 1st, 1983 until June 30th, 1984. That's 18 months.
Yes.
That's a year and a half, 6 quarters. In that 6-quarter period, U.S. real GDP grew by 12%. Real.
Wow.
Adjusted for inflation. Wow. That's at an 8% per annum annual rate. That's Chinese growth rates. That's what Reagan did, but he caused the recession first. Donald Trump got the growth, but did not cause the recession. He did not phase it in. He did it all really perfectly. And I can't tell you how impressive that is because he really understands these incentive things really clearly.
Yeah. I'm talking to Arthur Laffer, the great economist with Laffer Associates, who has been the a lead economist for obviously Ronald Reagan and was one of the people responsible for Reaganomics, and then did the same thing with Donald Trump and is responsible for Trumponomics. You must be proud, and I'm kind of proud. We the two of us, I much in a much smaller role, worked for two of the best presidents in the last 50 years.
Yeah, but I mean, your role is very, very important, Stephen. It's not a lesser role. We have different roles, but our two roles together are a left hook and a right punch. It's just a perfect combination. And then that includes, of course, your dear friend and my dear friend, and
of
both
course,
of
Larry
us were best men at your wedding, Larry Kudlow.
Yes.
It was just fantastic the way the three of us worked together.
So the book really chronicles how much better the economy performed under Trump than Biden. And now Kamala has a plan that we talk about in the book, which would, as I read the numbers, and by the way, her plan seems to change all the time, so this might not be precise, but she wants a big tax increase on capital gains income. She wants to increase the dividend tax. She wants to raise the top marginal tax rate from about 37 to about 41%. She wants to raise the estate tax. She thinks this is going to soak the rich and not harm the economy. What say you?
Well, it doesn't. That's not true. No, I did a book called Taxes Have Consequences.
Oh, I love that book.
It was a complete history of the U.S. income tax with Dr. Gene Sinkfield and Dr. Brian Dimitrovic as well, my co-authors on that.
Yes.
What we found is every time we've raised the highest marginal income tax rate in the United States, three things have happened. The economy has underperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone down, and the poor have been hammered. Every time we've cut tax rates on the rich, the economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone up.
Every time? Every time?
Every single time, Steve.
Wow.
I mean, I've got the numbers in there, the charts, and you can see it. It's just perfect. It's just beautiful. Yeah. And it makes so much sense. Rich people know how to shelter their income. They can hire lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, favor grabbers, politicians, and they have the means to do it. They're rich. And so when they think their tax rates are fair, they pay their taxes. But when they think the tax rates aren't fair, they shelter their income. And they do a really great job. And the poor are just hammered when the rich leave economics and go on their own.
So I'm talking to Arthur Laffer, the very famous economist. You're listening to the More Money Show on WABC. I've known you for a long, long time, Arthur, and you talk oftentimes, and I talk to your dog a lot too. So that's fantastic. How many dogs have you got there?
I've got dogs here. I can't. Sorry, something's happening outside. I think
that's okay.
Attacked by a herd of raccoons.
What kind of dog is that?
That's a Great Dane. I have two Great Danes right here, both of them.
Oh my God, that's wonderful. Well,
it is wonderful.
Explain to me, if you may, and to my audience, because a lot of people say, "Yeah, soak the rich; they've got all the money." Arthur, I mean, even some of my good friends, they don't kind of get it. They say, "Yeah, the rich should pay more," and they say we should tax these big inheritances, these big, the what we call the death tax. Soak them when they die. And you say that's one of the worst taxes of all. Can you explain? Because a lot of people support that policy and they don't understand why it doesn't work.
Well, the first place, again, the rich people have money and they don't want to pay the death tax. Mm-hmm. So they can shelter their income. They can move their income. They can get lawyers and accountants. They do. And they do it beautifully, Steve. I mean, they really, really do. I can't go through the evidence here, but it's incredible how they get around it. And then they do it inefficiently, so nothing works. I'm 84.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but we only get like 1% of our tax revenue from even though it's
even less than that now.
I think it might be less than that. So it's trivial how much money we raise from it, but it's a huge pain in the butt for, as you said, you got to have all these tax accountants, you got to have the lawyers, you got to da-da-da-da. And it just seems like it's a completely inefficient tax.
Yeah, it is. And it's also immoral. I mean, you can earn your income and you can pay your taxes fair and square, Steve. And you can take that money, you can go to Las Vegas, you can carouse, you can gamble, you can drink, and you can smoke. And as far as my federal government's concerned, God bless you. It's your money. Yeah. Go for it. But if you leave that money to your kids or anyone else's kids, if you leave it to anyone in the next generation, you bastard, we're going to tax the living bejabbers out of you, you antisocial rat. And, it makes no sense. The dream of America is to make the next generation better off. And I work for my grandkids and my great-grandkids. That's why I work. And if you tax that away, I'm not going to work and I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit out here and drink bourbon and not do anything.
So, Arthur,
I'm in Kentucky.
We're up against a hard break, and I promised I'd only keep you for 10 minutes. Could you stay on for 5 more minutes?
Oh, gosh, yes, Steve.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, folks. I'll be right back with my friend and co-author of the great book, The Trump Economic Miracle, now available on Amazon. We'll be back in 1 minute. This is the WABC More Money Show. I wanted to switch gears a little bit with you and ask you about the stock market, because you at Laffer Associates put out a great chart book that comes out, I think, what was it, once a month you put that out?
Once a month, yes. Yeah. We update it
and I was looking at your report, and there was a really interesting chart in there that kind of blew my mind, and it showed what has happened to the Japan stock market over the last 25 or 30 years versus the U.S. stock market. And it looks to me, if I have those numbers right, that Japan has pretty much flatlined over the last 30 years, where we've seen them in the U.S. We've just seen a
the last
massive.
4 days, they've done really well.
Okay, so they're coming back, but I'm talking about over that long period. So U.S. I mean the stock market's been a rocket ship. So what explains that?
Well, December 1989, the U.S. And Japan had the same market cap in the world. I mean, really the same total value of their stock markets. And then they put in their big across-the-board sales tax, national sales tax at 1%. The market collapsed. They've just had another increase, and today Japan has literally just disappeared from the face of the earth as far as being a major player in the economic scene.
And why did the U.S. stock market boom like it did?
Well, it wasn't so much the U.S. boomed as Japan collapsed. I mean, Japan's market cap, its stock market, the Nikkei index today is the same as it was in December of 1989.
That's incredible. So there's been no gains.
35 years, no appreciation at all.
Right.
None.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 38,900 in 1989, and it's 38,000 today. I mean, it's just been the catastrophe of the century, Japan has.
Well, what's so interesting about this is that you recall. Do you remember Lester Thurow? Do you remember him? That economist who said,
"You mean Les Thurow?"
Les Thurow. Well, for those who don't remember, he was talking about because Japan did great in the 80s until they hit that brick wall, and they had what they called a national industrial policy, and everybody said, "Oh, that's much better than cutting taxes. Let's have government hand out subsidies." And it looks like that model didn't work so well.
No, it didn't. And poor Lester is not with us any longer, so that's sort of sad. But he was wrong on economics everywhere he went, and especially on Japan, which he held up as the model. It's like Paul Samuelson. When Paul Samuelson, who was the noted left-wing economist from MIT, he said that Russia had it right and the U.S. had it wrong, and that Russia's going to take over the U.S. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes, I do.
These are all classics in the world economy. And, Lester Thurow, Paul Samuelson, they didn't get real economics. They knew their technical economics really well, but they didn't get the real economics and what happens in free enterprise economies.
Well, your friend Paul Krugman, who we were talking about earlier on the show, around 82, 83, he put out a famous memo saying that the Reagan disruption in inflation was temporary, and that inflation was going to take off again because of the tax cuts. Yep.
And he also said in 2016 at the Trump election, he said the market was down 800
points.
He said that's just beginning. It will. And they said, when will it recover? And he said it never will recover.
So let me, I've just got a couple more minutes with you. I know and appreciate I know how busy your schedule is on this Saturday afternoon, but I wanted to ask you about China. So it is really interesting. We just talked about the Japan stock market, but China has flatlined over the last 15 or so years too. I think that may surprise people. Everybody thinks China is taking over the world.
Well, I'm going to caution you on this. It's not the last 50. It's the last 4 or 5 years. It's really gone down, and that's because of Xi's policies. They went from 1970 to 2000, let's say 20. To 2020, they had the biggest boom of any country. They had the biggest tax cut. They went from all that. They pegged the yuan to the U.S. dollar. They
privatized
trade, all of that. They went up. I forget what the number was. 33-fold in real GDP per adult. Our country did it 4-fold. I mean, they did this wonderful supply side revolution that you and I lauded and praised them for. And then Xi came in, who's a left-wing dictator, if you can believe that. The left. And now he's taking all in the state wing. You see what he's done with Jack Ma and with all these other people in China. And it's just, they're on a tailspin. And I'll tell you, my forecast, in 15 years, China will be a non-player in the world economy.
Wow. Really?
I think that, when you do bad policies, you can become Britain. Look at what happened to Britain.
I know.
The end of the currency, it's so bad that they changed the name of the pound to the ounce.
You're very bad.
Thank you.
And also, why is it again that Ireland is a great place to invest in?
Because the capital is always Dublin. And that's
very good.
The one I love is, if as long as we could do that Kraft Food Company, the big dairy product, they do all the products there. They're opening up a new facility in the West Bank. Did you hear about that?
No.
They're going to call it Cheeses of Nazareth.
You're okay, folks. I promise I will not have You're great, Arthur. Arthur Laffer, the very, very famous economist. The book is The Trump Economic Miracle. By the way, tell our folks, our listeners, who wrote the foreword to that book.
A guy named Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It was really great. He wrote the beautiful foreword to it, and it's really good. And he really understands economics, which is so much fun.
And that is a big,
and it's lovely writing it with you, Steve, and it's lovely being on your show. Thank you,
Arthur. This is the
later,
WABC More Money Show, and we will be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. We have affiliates throughout the country, and thank you so much for taking some time on your busy Saturday afternoon to become educated about finance and the economy and some of the politics. And so I'm really so honored to introduce my next guest. That's Ralph Reed, who is one of the smartest political guys I know. And he and I have known each other for, 25 years or so. He is a wonderful guy. And I wanted to bring him on because we're all so hyper intensified with this election. Ralph, thanks so much for joining. Give me your latest assessment about where this race stands.
It's interesting, Steve. My view of this race has never changed through all the ups and downs and all the Sturm and Drang. We've had, it's hard to believe, but in the last roughly 90 days, we've had 2 conventions, 2 vice presidential picks, 2 debates, 2 assassination attempts, and an incumbent president withdraw from the race after securing his party's nomination, which has never happened before in American history. And through it all, the one consistent thread has been the closeness of this race, which today is effectively tied nationally, and it's effectively tied in the battleground states that will decide the outcome of the election.
And those states, of course, are, just to remind our listeners, and
Georgia,
I think most of them know, Georgia, yep.
North Carolina,
yep.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada.
Okay, so that's about 7 states, I think you just, 6 or 7.
7 states, yeah.
Okay. And so I couldn't agree more. You're exactly right. That's where we are at. And so, by the way, I've neglected to mention that, and I think most of you know this, that Ralph also runs an incredible organization called Faith and Freedom. By the way, tell people what Faith and Freedom does.
Faith and Freedom is a grassroots public policy organization that promotes pro-family policy. And when we get into an election year like this, our primary focus is voter registration, voter education, voter mobilization, and voter turnout. And we're focused, Steve, primarily on the roughly 45 million evangelical Christian and pro-family Roman Catholic voters. Nationwide, there are about 28 million of them in the battleground states.
Wow.
And right now, as you and I speak, we're about to knock on our 4 millionth door in those battleground states, and we're on our way to 10 million. This is the most ambitious and far-reaching grassroots get-out-the-vote effort by a conservative organization outside the Republican Party in either your or my lifetime. And I think it's going to make a big difference.
And so these evangelical Christians and other, well, what about Jews? Do you have Jewish folks who are part of Faith and Freedom?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So, it's interesting because Donald Trump was, previous to running for president, he really wasn't involved in the conservative movement, and especially with, groups that are more socially conservative. But it seems to me that Trump has a huge advantage among those voters.
No question. In fact, the most recent Pew Research poll, which is now probably a couple of weeks old, had him already at 82% among evangelical Christians, and Harris at 16%. And I think that gap is only going to grow. I think he got 84% of that vote, Steve. It's about 1 out of every 4 voters. He got 84% 4 years ago. I think that's his floor, and it could go higher.
So for our listeners who may not be evangelical Christians, or maybe even not even socially conservative, explain to me and our audience what it is that this group of voters admire so much about Trump.
Well, he's the most pro-life president in American history. He defunded Planned Parenthood. No one had ever done that. He spoke at the March for Life. No president had ever done that. Most importantly, Steve, he gave us the 3 Supreme Court justices and the roughly 225 other federal judges that moved the federal judiciary in a pro-life and pro-religious freedom direction. Obviously, ultimately led to the overturning of Roe. And then there are other issues. I mentioned religious freedom. That's really important. The Supreme Court had previously kind of had a bias against public expressions of faith at things like graduation ceremonies or the display of the 10 Commandments. That jurisprudence has all shifted. You're probably at least somewhat, and your listeners at least somewhat familiar with the Coach Kennedy case, where there was this high school coach in Colorado who had gone out on the field after a game and prayed with players voluntarily. Nobody was compelled.
Right.
And the Supreme Court upheld his right to do that. And then I would say finally, Steve,
by the way, the lower courts had decided in the other direction, right?
That is correct. He lost at every level until he got to the Supreme Court.
And hold on, Ralph, because I want to make sure people understand this. So it was not compulsory, right?
Right.
And he goes out and they would kneel and say a prayer, and the lower court said that was illegal.
The lower court said that was illegal. You can't even make it up.
Wow.
And not only did the Supreme Court rule in Coach Kennedy's favor, but most importantly, Steve, they overturned a 50-year precedent called the Lemon Test from a case called Lemon versus Kurtzman that set up this entirely subjective 3-part test of whether or not an expression of religious faith in a public setting was unconstitutional. I mean, it's hard to even believe this went on, but it didn't just go on, Steve. It went on. It went on for 50 years until Donald Trump.
You've known me for a long time. I'm a libertarian. I just want the government off of my back. And, I know a lot of our listeners may not even be socially conservative, but this isn't even about what your faith is. It's about your rights as an American.
It's about the First Amendment, 100%. Right. And then I would say the last issue, beyond the obvious ones, Steve, which are border, the economy, inflation, these voters care about that too. They're small businessmen and women. They're trying to make it in this economy. So all the stuff you have devoted your career to, they care about deeply. But another issue that resonates very powerfully in the faith community that is a reason for their unwavering support for Trump is he was the most pro-Israel president in American history, and he understands that rogue and bad regimes like Iran are what's wrong in the Middle East and what's wrong in the world, and Israel and the Jewish people are not the ones that are the problem in the Middle East. It's a thriving democracy, and he stood with Israel. And he not only stood with Israel, but he made the greatest strides towards peace in that region in the last, 30 or 40 years with the Abraham Accords. So these voters are strongly backing Trump. And I think it's one of the reasons why he's got a very good shot. I mean, he has a path to victory, Steve, in every single one of these battleground states. And these voters are one of the main reasons why.
You know, I've spoken many times at Ralph Reed. I'm talking to Ralph Reed, who is the president of the Faith and Freedom Coalition and does an amazing job. And Ralph has invited me many times to speak at his. When you have your conferences, I can't believe how many people, show up at those things. I think I spoke to one of the biggest crowds I've ever spoken to, and I have to say I was a little uneasy the first time I spoke at your conference because I'm the economic messenger. I'm not talking about social issues, and I didn't know how I would be received. But when I talked about lower taxes, less government regulation, getting the government off the back of our businesses, I'd get a standing ovation from these folks. So they too just want the government out of their lives, right?
Yeah, well, our good mutual friend Grover Norquist used to call it the Leave Us Alone coalition. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And you go back, you and I are both Reaganites. We both came up with Reagan, and he not only inspired both of us, but more importantly, he taught us and our generation that if you get the policy right, if you adopt the right policy, the politics will take care of themselves. And he famously said in his inaugural address, a truism that I think the Republican Party would do well, Steve, to get back to. He said, government isn't the solution to our
right.
problem. Government is the problem.
By the way, Ralph, did you happen to read the column by Kim Strassel in the Wall Street Journal this weekend? Have you read that yet?
I saw it. I haven't read it yet. It's on my.
It says exactly that. It's amazing. It says, why isn't Trump really stressing the fact that what Democrats are really for is just, if you want to, consolidate their agenda, it's bigger government, more taxes, more spending, more regulation. And she quotes what you just did. She said, Reagan said it well, that, government is too big and it's the problem, not the solution. And I hope Trump, starts to get back to that message. So every guest I have, I ask this question, and you're probably the best person of all to ask this question. So what should Trump be doing? Obviously, we've got, 4 weeks or so. It's amazing. And people have been starting to vote in a lot of these states that you mentioned. What would you like to see Trump doing that he's not doing to win this race?
Well, I'm not sure that I can't say for sure that he's not doing it, but I think he needs to do more of it. And that is, you have to tell the voters exactly what the contrast is. You have to explain it to them. So by the way,
Ralph, isn't that kind of self-evident?
Well, you would think so.
But you'd think so.
It's amazing how many politicians will get up and give their set Rotary Club speech and never explain to the voters what she's going to do versus what he's going to do.
So let me just interrupt you for 1 second on that, too. I mean, when I listen to Kamala Harris's speech, I think, I agree with that. I agree with that. But look at her record. I mean, she had the most liberal voting record in the Senate of, all these statistics. She was for all these things. Now she's against them. It's almost like a complete, what's that show? The complete makeover. That's what Kamala is doing right now.
Yeah, and I think what people have got to know is that at the top of that list is a $5 trillion tax increase.
Exactly.
This is going to be the largest tax increase in American history. It's going to increase taxes on consumers because the costs by raising the corporate tax rate are all going to be passed on to consumers. It's going to dramatically increase the capital gains tax, which is going to kill job creation in this economy. It's going to get rid of the 20% exemption that small business owners are able to exempt from taxes, which is going to be a crushing blow to small business. Then after she does that, it's going to be more spending blowouts, more of the same kind of giveaway programs that have caused the worst inflation in 40 years. Mm-hmm. And then after she does that, she's going to pack the Supreme Court and pass a national abortion law that is going to legalize in all 50 states abortion at every stage of pregnancy up to the moment of birth, paid for with tax dollars.
Wow. Now, and by the way, with no parental notification either. Right?
No parental notification, no parental consent, no reasonable restrictions. Steve, even a vast majority of Americans who call themselves pro-choice aren't for that.
Right. Yeah. So by the way, if you've got a 16-year-old daughter, she can't go and get a medical procedure without the, consent of her parents.
Right. And she's also said that she would repeal the filibuster in order to pass a law imposing term limits retroactively on the Supreme Court, allowing her to pack the Supreme Court. It would force the retirement of Alito, Roberts, and Clarence Thomas, and she would fill all three of those seats.
Yeah, that's scary.
With justices to the left of Sotomayor. So when you go out there and you explain that that's her policy, and then what's Trump going to do? He's going to put an end to their endless wars. He's going to cut taxes. Yep. He's going to extend the Trump tax cut. He's going to secure the border. He's going to strengthen this economy. When you explain that, and you're not talking about, people eating cats in Ohio, right. You can win the election.
So, Ralph, we have literally 1 minute left, and I wanted to just bring up one issue up quickly with our listeners. You and I have been working together on a project to sort of keep the government out of its hands off of the internet. And I wish you could just kind of explain, what the threat is here and why it's important that we allow free speech on the internet and other types of issues like that.
Well, it's very important because the internet is kind of the railroad or the automobile of the modern information-based economy. And like with everything else, the liberals aren't happy unless they're trying to control it and regulate it. And under Biden, they've passed net neutrality, which basically turns the internet into a government-regulated utility. Yes. They've also passed so-called digital discrimination, which allows them to say whether or not an internet or broadband company is discriminating against customers, and then that allows them to fine them and regulate them. And what this is ultimately about, Steve, in the end, is content control and suppressing conservative speech online. The big social media giants have done it. Google's done it. And the government will do it if you allow the government to have this kind of control over the internet. And I applaud you for helping to fight it.
Well, it's a big, big fight. And you don't always have to agree with some of the, big tech firms, but having the big brother tell us what we can and can't say on the internet, I think that's frightening. And they will discriminate against the one group that they will discriminate is people like you and me who are conservatives. Ralph Reed, thank you so much for joining. You are a fountain of wisdom as always, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is the second hour of our show. We're on every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. And I, again, want to thank our loyal listeners, or if you're a new listener, thank you for joining. We have a lot of fun on the show. We talk about economics, we talk about finance, we talk about politics, and we try to make it understandable to people so that you can make more money. That's what the whole thing is about. And so before we get to my next few guests, I wanted to mention a few things that right now I'm going to stand on my soapbox and tell you some things I'm really annoyed about. I'm just going to quickly go through these. One is that, this was a positive development, and you may recall I talked about this last week, but I'm very excited about this 3 Mile Island nuclear plant story. It's an incredible story that, some 40 some years after the 3 Mile Island accident, we are going to see that nuclear plant reopened. And folks, nuclear power is an important part of our energy constellation. It really is critical that we have nuclear power, that we have natural gas, that we have coal, that we have oil, that in certain states, you may be using solar power and wind power can work. But, let's face it, we're never going to be able to provide enough power for our soon to be $30 trillion economy that makes everything from steel to cars to manufactured products to the cloud, which uses enormous amounts of energy, as does artificial intelligence, the next big thing. We're going to have to pretty much double our electric power capacity over the next 25 years. And we better be ready for that, because the last thing we want to see is brownouts and blackouts like they've had in California. California tried green energy. It has been a total disaster. So what I'm telling you is that we should use everything. And I think most of you would agree with that. Everything we've got, and nuclear power should be part of that. Right now we get about 18% of our energy, that is our electric power, from nuclear power. We could probably double that if we wanted to with small nuclear reactors. It is a clean and safe and efficient and inexhaustible resource. There's no shortage of atoms to split, right? And so this would be a very smart way to get our energy. And by the way, it's homegrown. We don't have to rely on OPEC or Iran or Iraq or Russia or these other countries that hate us to get the energy. So it just makes so much sense. And you add that with natural gas, then we'll have plenty of oil and gas and coal and enough power to make sure that America remains the superpower of the planet. Now, the next thing I wanted to mention very quickly, because it's a theme of this show, is freedom of speech. By the way, this is Freedom of Speech Radio. Not today, but on normal weekends, I do take your calls, but we got such an action-packed 2 hours today. I don't have time to take your calls, but I'll try to do that next week. But many of you are regular listeners know I like to hear from people with opposite views of myself. Even my wife tells me that I'm not very I'm not right all the time, although I tend to think I am, but she corrects me on that. But here's the thing. This is a study that was done by YouGov of 20,000 adults. And it's very disturbing, folks. And I wonder how you would answer these questions. What it found was that the American people have been bullied into not speaking their minds. Now, it's not a direct freedom of speech issue. It's indirect. They bully people and they shame people from expressing their opinions. So, for example, the study found that a majority of Americans, 58%, think that most people cannot share their honest opinions about sensitive topics. They're just cowed. Here's another one: 36% of Democrats and 14% of Republicans publicly say they trust the government. That's a small amount, but when you ask them in private, what do they say? Just 5% and 2% agree with trusting the government. So people are afraid to speak out against their own government. Folks, that's a scary idea. Here's one. 59% of Americans think there's too much government control in America, but only 50% say that publicly. Americans are afraid to say that they don't necessarily believe in the green agenda. They don't, all this stuff. Oh, there's a consensus about climate change. Well, there's a consensus if you bully people into saying that you believe in it. But a lot of people have skepticism. I have skepticism. I'm not a scientist, but I wonder whether the government and we as humans are really affecting the planet's temperature. I mean, it's been changing for millions of years, and millions of years before there were human beings on this planet. And so that is a story that I want you to all be paying attention to. One last one, this is a theme that I've talked about so often, is what the Democrats stand for is free everything. Did you know that? Free college, free this, free that, free healthcare, free childcare, free. You don't have to pay your student loans back. We'll buy your food for you with food stamps. Everything's free. right? And it sounds so wonderful. And it sounds like, gosh, this is great. The government's going to be our mama, and our government's going to give us everything that we want. And so I saw that this congressman, who's very influential, he's our lead spokesperson for the Kamala Harris campaign. His name is Ro Khanna. You may have seen him on CNN or Fox or other shows because he's on TV all the time. And he's supposed to be one of the smartest Democrats. Oh, he's so smart, Ro Khanna. He has proposed a $100 billion a year annual free childcare. Free childcare. It is the nanny. It is not figuratively. It is literally the nanny state, because the government's going to give you a free nanny. What is this? How are we going to all afford this? I hope American people are smart enough to understand that, as Ronald Reagan used to say, a government that's big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take away everything you got. And he was so true about that. Yes, they can spend trillions of dollars these handouts. Where are they going to get the money? You and I and everybody listening to the show knows the answer to that question. The only way they can get the government is to take it away from us, because the government doesn't produce anything. All they do is take money from us and spend it on things like this. We are moving so rapidly to a cradle-to-grave government safety net. I think it is. And look, I'm not against providing people in need with some benefits, so we don't want people to go hungry. We don't want people to go homeless. But come on, we're spending trillions of dollars now giving handouts to people. And, one of Moore's theorems is that you should never do something for someone that they can do for themselves. That has to do with children, and has to do with young adults, and it also has to do with American taxpayers. If people can do it for themselves, let's not have the government do that for them. It has very negative effects. It makes them dependent. And who knows? I don't know. I'm not a conspiratorialist, but maybe that's what Democrats want. Maybe they want us all to be dependent on government. Hopefully we're smart enough to see through that. Folks, we got a great second hour coming up. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. Thanks again for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to become more educated about the economy, about finance, about business, and of course, about politics, and about how to make more money. And one of the guys who knows a lot about making money is Richard Salzman, who is the president of Intermarket Forecasting. I look at his newsletter. It comes out a couple times a week. I find it to be fascinating. I use Richard's stuff so often, I feel like I'm plagiarizing him. Richard, thanks so much for coming on.
Steve, it's great to be here, and you talk to me guiltlessly. Don't worry about it.
Well, it is so great stuff. And you know what I like about your stuff is it's easy to understand. Sometimes these financial reports come out and I don't have any idea what they're talking about. But you provide solid data, really great graphics. And how do people get that, by the way?
Say again?
How do they get your material?
I have clients and subscribers. They're mostly money managers. Okay. So most of the stuff I put out is how the stocks, bonds, currencies, and commodities are doing. But obviously the economic, inflation background matters as well, and public policy.
So can people sign up? Do they have to become?
If they want to, all they have to do is search by Intermarket Forecasting. Okay. And they'll get to the website. They'll get to a nice website, and they'll see all the past reports.
So it was really great stuff. I use your charts and analysis all of the time. And your latest one, I literally just came across my desk this morning, was about what the real story on manufacturing. And this is an important one because Kamala Harris is saying no manufacturing jobs were created by Trump, which just doesn't sound right to me. And she said, we're creating so many manufacturing jobs under Biden, which doesn't seem right to me. So what is the real story here?
Well, it's easy to find this data. I just went right straight to the government data. And it turns out that just before Trump and Pence took office and until it peaked in just before COVID, 473,000 manufacturing jobs were added.
Hold on. A half a million manufacturing
nearly
jobs.
Half a million, yeah.
In 3 years. That's incredible.
Up to like 12.8 million. Then it went sideways for a while, but it by no means collapsed. She said the other day that jobs were down in this area 200,000 before the COVID lockdowns. Not true. Not true at all. It was kind of going flat before then. All right, so then it had this rebound. It had this spike.
Well, hold on, Richard. So what happened? Obviously, manufacturing employment fell dramatically during the lockdowns.
Oh, right? Yes, right, yes. Well, the lockdowns are obviously, lockdowns are obviously going to cause a spike downward.
Of course, yes.
So then the question is, how much does it come back up? Some of what she's done is take credit for the bounce back, which is ridiculous. So more relevant is to look at, okay, after things got back to normal, what did the Biden-Harris policy mix do? They've been stagnating since October 2022. Jobs in the manufacturing sector have gone nowhere almost for 2 years. Yeah. And actually in the last, since January of this year, Steve, they're down 39,000. So it's a complete reverse of how she's portraying it. Yeah. Now, this is supposed to be a robust economic time, right? Not any turmoil or anything like this. Is supposed to be Bidenomics, and they're the ones overseeing stagnant manufacturing job performance.
Well, I'm not too surprised by what you found in your analysis because, at Unleash Prosperity, we have a number of members who run manufacturing plants, and they've been telling me for about the last 6 months or so that orders have really slowed down, that companies are really hesitant to expand their capital purchases. And so it just sounds like, the manufacturing sector is at best stagnant right now.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I use, Steve, that are confirming and that there'll probably be a recession, that we're maybe in one now and it could continue for a while. When the yield curve inverts, when short-term interest rates go above long-term interest rates, it doesn't happen very often. It's only happened 8 times since 1968. It's always followed by a recession with a lead time of about 12 to 18 months. It's also a perfect forecast in the sense it never gives a false signal. We never get a recession without that happening. The curve did invert because of Fed rate hikes starting about October 2022, and it's still inverted today. And we know they've reverted to rate cutting. But one of the interesting, to uninvert the curve, if you will. But one of the things I recently discovered is when they start doing it, it's not necessarily good for equities. It's not necessarily good for the economy. It's already the case that this inverted yield curve, which wrecks the credit markets and is a leading indicator of manufacturing contraction, is almost unavoidable. So I think one of the important things for Trump Vance to kind of emphasize is that the Biden Harris, call it Powell, throw in the Fed there policy is already causing problems, and they're going to be in there to fix it. And it's like Reagan, Steve, you and I are old enough to know when Reagan got in, it was trouble for the first couple of years, but he was able to, accurately portray it as the Carter leftover from the Carter policies. That's going to be the case here, I think. But if that's what you're referring to, the people in manufacturing who are seeing this, I think that's one of the reasons it's happening.
I think this is a very important point you're making, Richard, because, what you're saying, and I think this is true, is when Trump wins, and I think Trump, God willing, will win this race, it's going to take him some time, folks, to undo the damage that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done to our country with the massive debt. Do you think, Richard, that the inflation fight is over, as the Fed seems to think it is? And also, what did you make of the 50 basis point decline in interest rates by the Fed?
Well, it's clearly a panic-type cut. They don't really do that unless they see a recession coming, which is another indicator that a recession is coming. But I've
been wondering about that. Let me just stop you right there and explain this to our listeners, because this is a really important point. They did a jumbo rate cut. It's very unusual to do a 50 basis point cut like this. And when inflation really is still running at about 3%, so you don't really see the need for doing that. And my only other possible hypothesis is maybe they're saying something in the data that was really scared them about the slowdown in the economy.
Absolutely. And if you remember back in July when the unemployment rate ticked up and the markets did very badly, people were invoking what they called the SAHM rule, SAHM. Claudia Sahm worked for the Fed. She developed this rule for indicating when recessions were imminent. And it was if the inflation rate troughed out, and it has at 3.5%, and then went up more than 0.5%, and it has, it's about 4.3%, you always get a recession. In other words, when you get this inflection point to that degree, the unemployment rate never just kind of levels off or reverts. It keeps going up and up and up. So I think the Fed knows this internal metric, They also, by the way, know that an inverted yield curve does lead events. They know both of those things. They're not going to say it publicly, though, Steve. The Fed never comes out publicly and says, here comes a recession.
Of course.
They feel they'll be blamed for it. So that's a reason not to listen. So watch what they do, not what they say. And do, as you said, doing a 50 basis point cut is a sign that they're worried that the recession is coming.
They're very worried. And I'm worried. I think we should all be worried because these policies are so anti-growth coming out of the Biden and Harris administration. In their last few minutes left, by the way, I'm talking to Richard Salzman, who is one of the best economic forecasters I know. He runs intermarket forecasting. And so we've now got a situation where, the next 4 or 5 weeks, in terms of what happens with the economy, could really determine the outcome of this election. I was a little surprised. I wonder what you think about what happened with consumer confidence. It fell in September, which sort of surprised me. And it's been low for a long time. Consumers seem to be very worried, as you are.
Yeah, the two main ingredients I found that go into that is the employment trend and the inflation trend. So if they, it is kind of a rear view mirror thing. So what are they looking at? They're looking at a worsening job market. They're looking at consumer price basket, which is so inexpensive. And it could be that they're looking at, I don't know, if Harris Walz win, I think most people realize that is a move toward more socialist policies. And I'm not saying every voter or every confidence index answerer knows this, but the polls we see are very close, right? So it seems like a nice edge. I like you, Steve, think there's a huge difference between the policy mix, the more supply side policy mix offered by Trump Vance than the other side. But the other side, they're already bad. They've been in office 3 years. The idea that they would be in office further, and Walz is to the left of Biden. So that whole combination of Harris-Walz is more left wing than Biden-Harris. Even that's almost hard.
Have we ever had a big economic recovery when we had a massive tax increase? I don't know that that's ever worked. Right?
I'll get back to you on that, Steve. I haven't found.
You got to look through the history books because nothing in our lifetime. Well, Richard, you are a fantastic forecaster. Your record is amazing. He is the president of Intermarket Forecasting, Richard Salzman. I hope you'll come on again sometime soon before the election, and let's get let's see what the economy is doing in 2 or 3 weeks, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC Talk Radio.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. Thanks so much for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. I hope everyone is having a wonderful weekend. I brought back today Mark Mattson, who I interviewed on this show about a month ago, and we got such a positive response, Mark, from your visit to our show that I just had to have you back on because you really inspire people. You and I had lunch in New York a week or two ago, and just listening to your life story and how you were able to become successful and how you're trying to make a formula for success for young people. I have 3 sons who are just sort of starting their careers, and boy, every young person needs career advice about how to be a success. Your book is called Experiencing the American Dream. Mark Mattson, folks, you got to get this book if you want to understand how it is that all of us can achieve the American dream. So, Mark, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure to be with you, Steve.
So, Mark, let's get right down to it. You were talking about to me when we had lunch about your life, how you were able to start a business, make it a success. You now have hundreds of employees. And what is the advice you give to young people?
Well, for young people, first of all, I just want to acknowledge for young people that it's a tough environment. It's a tough set of circumstances. And Kamala Harris was talking about the other day. She said that, look, the American dream is dead, and you can't afford a house, and that you got to take that off of the table. That the young people aren't going to be able to afford a home, and I just want to stand up directly against that and say that that's not true. I mean, yes, interest rates are high, but if you're young and you're hardworking and you're committed and you're dedicated, that you can still have the American dream and you can create value for other people. I think the critical thing for young folks is to have the right mindset. Mm-hmm. And there's two different mindsets. So there's the mindset of personal responsibility and creating for value for other people first. And then there's a mentality of victimhood and entitlement. And
so hold on, Mark, stop right there. Stop right
Absolutely.
there, because that's a really critical point. And I want to make sure people are listening loud and clear what you just said, because it is so absolutely correct. There are two models. There is one about the opportunity and the, having the vivacity to go forward and add value to other people. By the way, the only way you can make money in a capitalist system is by adding value to other people. You know that. You did it. But the other model, which I fear, Mark, is becoming more predominant, is the victimhood model. And it's like my old friend Jack Kemp, who a great American. Everyone knows Jack, and he was the author of the Reagan Tax Cut. He used to always say, if you want to teach a kid how to ride a bike, you don't start out by telling them you'll never be able to ride this. You're going to fall down all the time. You're going to skin your knee. I mean, we almost give people a recipe for disaster, for failure, not success.
We really do, and I came from the hills of West Virginia. And I think people get confused and say, well, but I have a really low starting point. I don't mm-hmm. have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. But regardless of your starting point, the way you see the world and yourself in the world is more mm-hmm. important than where you started. My grandfather got stuck in the hills of West Virginia, never got out of the coal mines, never got out of the chemical factories. My dad, on the other hand, believed in the American dream and believed in capitalism, and had a mindset that if you create value for other people, you will be rewarded, and that nobody, this is really key, Steve, is that he taught me nobody owes you anything mm-hmm. that you didn't earn yourself. And that mindset, even this might sound simple, but if you can actually adopt that as a motto of a way of living your life and you're a young person, there are so many opportunities in the world to create wealth and prosperity for yourself and others. But that veil of victimhood will not allow it to happen.
No, it's an excuse for failing, and I'm not saying that there aren't people that face high hurdles. I mean, I was lucky. I grew up in a more affluent area. I was able to go to some of the best schools, and I feel myself blessed for that. But a lot of people who grew up with me, the same circumstance, they didn't. They didn't succeed in their life. And look, there's a lot of luck, but there's a lot of opportunity in being. And look, I'm not saying I'm super successful. I just feel blessed in my life. I've been able to, Mark, do what I love for my career. And that's really something amazing. And you have now started this new it was an organization, a project you were telling me about at lunch that is so inspiring. So tell us about this new project you have. Is it in Arizona? Is that where it's located?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I just finished the book, and it's a national best-selling book, Experiencing the American Dream.
Right.
Part of my 5-year mission is to create a Dream Center, and in the Dream Center.
Wait, hold on. What is a Dream Center? What does that mean?
Yeah. So it's an experiential. You kind of think of it like Disney for understanding economics and fulfilling on your American dream.
Okay.
And so it's got, it's got a different exhibits that take you through with the aid of your cell phone and technology, then that you can create a dream, create your aspirations, understand how the economy works, understand how entrepreneurism works, understand how the human brain works, understand the academics behind investing. And it's experiential in nature. There's nothing like it in the world. And then it will also allow people to come in, whether they're charities or young people trying to start new companies, and they can come in and they can have board meetings and brainstorm. It's basically a home for entrepreneurism, creativity, and innovation to teach people those values. Because I don't think they're being taught, Steve, in colleges so much, or even in high school,
and not even in MBA programs.
Right.
So the book is called Experiencing the American Dream. by Mark Matson. And if you want to be a success, this doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly help you on the road to a successful career. And by the way, one of the things you told me that I find to be so true is that it doesn't even really matter that much how much money you make. I mean, everybody wants to make money and everyone wants to be financially successful, but it's really doing what you love and, contributing to the well-being of, others. You put it so well that the only way in a capitalist system you can make money is by adding value for other people.
Yeah, I think it's so ironic, and I've worked with a lot of people with a lot of money over the years, large portfolios, but money doesn't actually make you happy.
No, it doesn't.
Taking your portfolio from $2 million to $4 million doesn't make you twice as happy. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, a lot of times when people amass more money, they actually experience more stress and anxiety and negative feelings. Mm-hmm. You think of people like Elvis or Marilyn Monroe or Prince, people that had a lot of fame, a lot of prestige, a lot of money, but it actually brought them pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. When we were kids, we had, I only lived in a house maybe like 1,500 square feet when I was little, but we had optimism, we had love, we had faith, we had a feeling of gratitude for living mm-hmm. in America and that anything was possible if we worked hard enough. And that way of being and seeing the world, I'm trying to teach people that way of being in the world is a bigger part of the American dream than just having the house or the retirement.
Well, when you were saying that, I was thinking of this famous poem and song. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Richard Cory. Do you know that song? Or
I don't know if I know that one.
Oh, well, it's a sort of Paul McCartney sang the song, and it's about, I wish that I could be Richard Cory because he's the richest man in this town and he owns the factories. And the person who's singing is saying, I work in his factories. And boy, I sure wish I could be Richard Cory. He's got the big parties and he's got the Rolls Royces and stuff. And at the end, it says, Richard Cory took a gun and put a bullet through his head. And it makes the point that you're making, that just because you're rich doesn't make you happy. And meanwhile, this person who is happy wants to be Richard Cory. But it's important. I'll send you the poem because it's really an instructive thing. And it is true. And look, it is so interesting to me that, I'll meet my gardener, person who does our, takes care of our lawn service and stuff. And he's one of the happiest people I've ever met. He's always smiling. He's full of joy. He takes a lot of pride in the work that he does. And so you're so right. You just have to find a mission for your life. And sometimes that's hard to do. How'd you figure it out?
Well, my dad taught me early on. He said, look, if you want, whatever you want to do in life, whether it's fitness or whether it's money or business or spirituality, find somebody that already has what you want, mm-hmm. and then have them mentor you, coach you, study how they think, study how they look at the world, study how they behave, study their actions, because without a doubt, there's whatever it is you want to create in life or experience, chances are there's someone that's already been there. And if you'll just eliminate the mm-hmm. and actually take the coaching, which a lot of people won't, they'd rather be right than get the result, then you'll have great results in life. And I've always been pretty coachable, and I've always been mm-hmm. very fortunate to find great mentors to help me along the way.
That is so important. I couldn't agree more. I've been really lucky in my life to have great mentors, and they really can put you on the path to success. Mark Matson, you are a national hero for what you have done. When will the Dream Center be ready?
That's my 3-year project, so I'm working hard on that. I'm working on a documentary, too, on the behavior, the psychology of investing and neurology behind how the human brain works and how people think about investing. So we're going to get the documentary done, then we're going to turn our vision to the Dream Center.
Well, the book is called Experiencing the American Dream. I have read it. I found it inspiring. It helped me in my thinking about my career and how do you proceed to the next level. Mark Matson, thanks so much for coming on this Saturday afternoon. This is the More Money Show, and this is WABC Talk Radio.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. My next guest is Tom Bevan of Real Clear Politics, who has his finger on the pulse of what's going on. Tom, I know you have a very busy afternoon. Thanks for carving out some time. Give our listeners a sense of how you think this race is looking. All the polls show it pretty much a toss-up right at this point. But I always say you have to really look at those battleground states to really know what's happening. What's your assessment, Tom?
Yeah, and we just got a lot of battleground state data over the last 48 hours. Fox News polls, The Hill, Emerson College had some polls, Bloomberg, Morning Consult had some polls. And right now, if you take an average of the 7 battleground states, Harris is leading in those 7 battleground states by 0.5%. If you look at our electoral college map right now, if the election were held today and all of these polls were exactly spot on, which they're not going to be, but if they were, she would win the electoral college 270 to 268.
God,
so I think
that's amazing.
It's about as close.
So
as
it could come down to a couple of electoral votes.
Absolutely. I mean, this race is reminding me, Steve, a lot of 2016, and Harris has about a 1.8% lead in our national average. Hillary Clinton was at about 2. And these battleground states are all really, really close. In fact, if you compare where Trump was in 2016 and definitely 2020 to where he is now, he's in a much stronger position. So on one hand, Harris has managed to make this back to basically a toss-up race. On the other hand, I think Trump is still, he's in a better position than he was 8 years ago and 4 years ago. So I think he's certainly got a very good chance at winning this race still.
So do you think that people really know that much about Kamala Harris at this point?
I don't, actually, and that's one of the things. I think there has been this, real push. Obviously, she's injected enthusiasm into the Democratic base. They were sort of moping about for weeks and months. Now they're excited, and with the help of the media, quite frankly, and the assist that they've gotten from the media, portraying her as the next coming of Obama. When just a couple of months ago they were writing stories about how Democrats were thinking about dropping her from the ticket.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's been quite the reversal. And so, but she hasn't really done, this interview she did with CNN the other night was like the first time that she's actually answered questions. And I don't know that.
Wait, hold on. What questions did she answer?
I see what you did there, Steve. Yeah, but
hey, Tom, I'm still trying to figure out what she would do on her first day in office.
It's pretty remarkable, and so that's why I think this debate is going to be important, because it happens, and because it might be the only time where she has to stand on stage and really take hard questions from Trump and defend her record and defend her policy flip-flops and all of those things, because I'm not sure the media is going to do it.
So how important do you think authenticity is? Because, when you hear the word genuine and authenticity, that you don't think of Kamala Harris. I mean, she said, she's changed all her positions, but she hasn't changed her values. But this is kind of a boilerplate politician who just sticks her finger to the wind. And one day she's for this, the next day she's for the other side of it. Is that a problem for her?
Yes, I think it is, but I'm not sure it's going to end up being decisive. We'll have to see, because again, I think the media is sort of giving her a pass on that. So,
right.
It depends on, what independent voters, where they're getting their information, how they're receiving it, and how they react to it. So, the one thing is that I think authenticity is important, and that's one of the reasons that I think, Trump's base is as solid as it is. They like him. They think he's very authentic. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is that, the other side, they really do hate Donald Trump with a passion, and they're willing to give anybody a pass or forgo whatever to beat him. And I think Kamala Harris is certainly benefiting from that.
Okay, Tom, I know we only have a minute of your time left. So on the way out, I'm going to ask you a question I asked Newt Gingrich earlier on this show. If you were giving advice, I'm going to ask you about both. If you were giving advice to Kamala Harris, what would you advise her to do to win this race? And if you were giving advice to Donald Trump, what would you advise him to do?
Wow, that's a good question. I think for Kamala Harris, to your point, I think she should, if she's going to first of all, I think she should do more media. I don't
right.
I don't know why she's so afraid and why her handlers are so afraid of her being in front of the cameras. I would also tell her that she should own some of these flip-flops. I mean, I think the American public would be more forgiving of a candidate who said, you know what, that was a bad.
I changed my mind. Yeah.
I changed my mind. And here are the reasons that I changed my mind, as opposed to just lying to them and saying, I really didn't change my mind. And for Trump, I tell him I tell him what everybody else is basically telling him, which is, stick to the issues. He's ahead on all of the issues, and economy, inflation, et cetera.
Right.
And stay away from the personal stuff.
Yeah. That's a tough one because, I've been around Trump for 9 years now, and I love the guy, but sometimes, sometimes less is more with Trump.
He does not understand that concept for sure.
He sure doesn't. Well, Tom Bevan, I know you're really super busy. We'd love to call on you in the weeks to come as this race approaches Election Day. Have a great afternoon, my friend.
Happy to do it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Folks, we'll be right back. That was Tom Bevan, by the way, of Real Clear Politics. This is the More Money Show.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. We come to the end of the show. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you listened to the whole 2 hours. We had a lot of fun this afternoon. I just want to end by telling you that sometimes people say, "Oh, you're Steve Moore. You're so pro-Republican, and you seem to love the Republican Party." And I want to make sure the people understand that I am not a rah-rah Republican. And people who know me and have followed me over the years know that I can go after the Republicans too. And I want to let you know that there was a vote in the United States Senate recently and it was an amendment to the budget by my friend Rand Paul. And as I see it, there's really only 3 or 4 Republicans in the entire United States Senate who really want to get serious about the debt. And by the way, there are probably 0. Wouldn't you say, Tim? Probably 0. Tim Desher is my producer today. Appreciate him being here and making the show possible. But you've got Rand Paul and you've got Mike Lee and you got a few others like Ted Cruz who do want to cut the budget and make a serious effort to get rid of all this excessive government spending. But there was an amendment to cut spending that Rand Paul put. And the good news is 39 Republicans out of 49, I think they have 49. So at 39 out of 49 voted for this budget to cut spending. By the way, that means there are 10 Senate Republicans who did not want to cut the budget. Come on. What are they there for if they don't want to downsize our government? And then after that, there was a vote on whether to pass this enormous continuing resolution, this massive fat budget to get us through December. And you can make a political case for doing this, but, most of the Republicans voted for that too. So, that makes me angry. We have to have a Republican Party that stands for small government. Last thing I would say, my good friend, Kim Strassel, who I worked with at the Wall Street Journal for 10 years and a good friend and a great columnist. You all read her. I hope you all read her column every Friday called Potomac Watch in the Wall Street Journal. And she had an absolutely excellent article this weekend, which basically says, why aren't the Republicans saying what Reagan said? That government isn't the solution, government is the problem. And if you think about it, it really crystallizes where we're at right now. You've got a Democratic Party that believes big government is the solution to every problem in America. Free childcare, free this, free healthcare, free student loans, college is going to be free. And that's going to bankrupt the country. You all know that. It's going to bankrupt the country if you do that. Big government is not the solution, as Reagan said. Big government is the problem. And I think the majority of Americans understand that. I think most Americans say, hell yes, big government is the problem. High taxes, high regulation, too much government spending, too much government debt, too much of the government telling us what we can and can't do, as she says in her piece. I mean, my God, these idiot politicians, mostly Democrats, want to take away your car. They want to take away your gas stove. They want to take away your air conditioning. I mean, these are Stalinists. They believe government should rule everything in your life. I'm a libertarian. I want the government to be small as possible, to do the things that they're constitutionally responsible for, to, build the roads and have control crime and control our border and for the most part, let our businesses succeed. And so I'm telling you, it is my kind of last comment of the day that we need the Republican Party to be the party of free enterprise, freedom, liberty, and limited government. And we don't need two big government parties in Washington. Let's put it like that. All right. Let's all work together to make sure that Republicans stay true to those principles, because sometimes they waver. You got a lot of big government Republicans in the party right now. You got a big movement called national conservatism that wants to use big government to advance conservative causes. I guarantee you, folks, that's not going to work. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC. Folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll be with you next Saturday. Same bat time, same bat channel, 1 to 3 p.m. on WABC on Saturday afternoon.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply.